Hello and welcome to another episode on the Hexion channel. Thank you for stopping by. We're gonna try to break away from the previous format, which is I do some research, write out a script, and I read it off like a book. I'm gonna try to do it a little bit differently, which I would have research information on hand, and I'll tell you guys about the story as we go, which I feel is more organic and more natural. But before we start, please be advised that some information on this stories are pretty disturbing, especially some of the content that have to do with one of the books that's in this story. So viewer discretion is advised. So let's begin. I'm going to tell you guys about a murder case in Japan. It's called the Kobe child murders. It involves several underage minors. What makes this case special for me is that because of this case, this caused shockwave through Japan is so severe that the politician in Japan actually motioned for a revision for the legal system to lower their legal age for criminal responsibility from the minimal age of 16 down to 14, which is the age of our perpetrator in this case. So the case first broke on May 27, 1997, in front of a school gate, the school gate of a junior high school called Tomogaoka, located in Kobe, which is part of Hyogo Prefecture in Japan. It's a very small town. Police found the head of an 11-year-old special need elementary school student named Jun Hase in front of the school gate in the morning hours of 6:40 a.m. on May 27, 1997. Inside his mouth was also a letter written in red ink, written by a person called himself Sakakibara Sato. It's basically a letter declaring war on law enforcement and, quote, the oppressive educational system of Japan, unquote. As I said, the discovery was so shocking that a small town would have somebody who can do such a cruel thing to a special needs student that it caused a lot of widespread panic for parents in Japan at the time. Even though the police were able to apprehend the suspect only about a month later, it just created more questions than answers when they got the suspect, because the suspect in this case was only 14 years old at the time. At the time, because of the age limit for criminal liability was 16 in Japan, so the name of the person was not released, and he was only referred as Shonen A at the time in the newspaper and news reports. However, a couple years later, after Shonen A's release from the legal system, after he turned 21, one of the Japanese tabloid, Shunkan Post, released his full name and a picture of him in their publication, stating that they do so, which is illegal, defying the court order, was to for the benefit of the general public because of the nature of the crime he had committed. So the name they published was Shinichiro Azuma, which is the name of a 14-year-old at the time when he committed the murders. So when he was first arrested in 1997, which he was arrested a month after the head of June Hase was found. According to police, he also confessed to another murder which took place in March that same year, where a little girl was bludgeoned to death in the head by a blunt object while walking home from school with another friend, who was also attacked but was only injured. The little girl was bludgeoned, injured, and sent to the hospital, but unfortunately she died a week later. When after Shinichiro Azuma turned 21 in 2003, the three-person parole board granted his parole and subsequent release. But strangely, unlike some of the other cases on crimes committed by minors, the president of the parole board, Tetsuo Obata, had decided to release the information about Shonen A's release, which is Shinichiro, to tell the public that he is being released. Of course, he didn't tell them the real name of Shinichiro at the time. He was just telling the public that the perpetrator of the crime is being released into public. Probably due to the widespread interest in the case, from mentioning in news and a lot of the special books that were published, which the victims of the parents of the both victims have also published books regarding the case and how they have dealt with the loss of their child after the fact. Okay. So ever since the arrest of Shonen A in 1997, there have been a large number of former classmates and faculty members and other volunteers from legal professions and all walks of life have been claiming that Shonen A was actually framed, and the confession that the police obtained was actually by coercion and not by his own will. They have formed a group called the Kobe Child Murders Truth Seekers Group, which had a website, and they actually made some physical publications and pamphlets pointing out some of suspicious points in the police investigation. A couple points that they pointed out here. The first one is the timeline of the discovery of June's head on May 27, 1997. According to a police report, the head was discovered at 6:40 a.m. In front of the school gate. But the Truth Seekers Group, the group of volunteers, claimed that they had reliable information and actual testimonies from multiple individuals stating that they had passed by the school gate as early as 1 to 2 a.m. all the way up to 5 a.m. and had said that they did not see the head at the gate, which is contradictory to the confession that the police had, which stated the head was placed near the school gate between 1 and 2 a.m. The second point that they pointed out is the medical anomaly on Jun Hase's body, which was discovered 2 days after his head was found. It was discovered in a broadcasting antenna station on a hilltop nearby, near the school. the medical anomaly that they pointed out was that when Jun Hase's head was cut, it was cut under the second section of the spinal column, which they claimed would not be possible for a young boy 14 years of age and not especially smart. They claim that to be able to cut like that, it will require a lot of medical experience and knowledge in body anatomy. It will also require a special table so that the perpetrator will be able to tip Jun's head upward to expose more of his neck so they can make a precision cut. But according to the police report, the actual murder and dismemberment took place at the antenna station where the body was found, which the group have claimed that there was no tables of any kind that the perpetrator could have used to do the cut at that location. A third point that they also pointed out was the decoloration of Jun Hase's body, which was discovered 3 days after the head. According to the group, they pointed out that when the body was found, the color of the body was actually light red. But according to them, through their medical research, the body after that period of time would have been in a purplish color instead of light red, which they think is an indication that the body had been frozen to delay the decomposition, which they said would also explain why the cut on the head was easier, because the body was frozen. But however, in a very unexpected twist, Shinichiro Azuma, after several years of his release in 2004, published a 294 pages memoir in June of 2015, which I obtained a copy, well, a translated copy right here. It's a memoir written by him and published in 2015. He was released in January of 2004. At the release of this memoir, he was 32 years old. So the memoir detailed his childhood, the time he spent with his parent, his grandmother, and eventually how he began torturing animals and all the way up to the murders that he had committed. So as you can see, the publication of this book basically tell everybody that he was in fact the perpetrator of the murders that he had confessed to. In the book, there were a lot of graphical detail of animal torture and what he had done with Jun Hase, and how he had committed the first murder with the little girl a couple months prior to his killing of Jun Hase. The name of the book was called Decca, Song of Desperation. When the book was published, there were a lot of outrage, of course, led by the parents of the murder victims. And they had sent letters to publication houses to urge them to refuse to stock the book. One of the major bookstores in Japan actually answered and did not stock that book in their stores across Japan. But despite that, the first edition of 100,000 copies were completely sold out within 3 weeks and was actually on the top selling list within those weeks. From the sale of those books, it was estimated that Shinichiro Azuma, Shonen A, received around 10 million Japanese yen in royalty from that. Prior to that, there was a civil suit filed by the parents of the murder victims, and they had won the case for considerable settlement. I believe it's 8 million yen. Can't remember the exact amount. But from what I can tell and the research that I conducted, Shinichiro Azuma did not pass over any of the earnings that he had gotten from the memoir to the families of the victims. After this, we're gonna talk a little bit about the content of the book, but again, there are a lot of graphical details and disturbing information about the case that he had written in the book, so viewer discretion is advised. So in the early chapters of the memoir, Shonen A recounted his early childhood as loveless and without affection from his parents. According to some research, his father was actually not around for the most part, and he would be out 2 to 3 weeks at a time away from home. So majority of the upbringing was from his mother. When he was first born, he was well taken care of and loved by the mother. But since he was the first of 3 brothers, when his 2 other brothers was born, his mother was so busy taking care of the other 2 brothers that she began to neglect Shinichiro. So in turn, Shinichiro began to look for affection and love from his grandmother, who lived with them at the time. It was also a catalyst of what happens afterwards, when his grandmother suddenly passed away when he was 10 years old. In one of the chapters, Shinichiro described an event soon after his grandmother's passing away. He was in his grandmother's room, looking through her old stuff, and specifically he was looking at the massager that his grandmother used to use on her shoulders and back to ease the pain. He turned it on and held on to it, but for some reason he became sexually aroused and actually reached sexual climax. That was the first time, in his own words, he said he had felt something changed in him. As we can tell, his brain began to connect sexual pleasure with death, which is often a telltale sign of a serial killer. From that point onward, I began to have a growing fascination with death and sexual tension when the 2 began to link together, pushing him to do more and more. When he first started, it was cruelty to animals. One of his first record that he had written in the memoir about his torture of animals was him killing his first cat. So it was a stray cat that he had found in the yard of his grandmother's home. He was staying there, looking through his grandmother's stuff. His grandmother also had a dog, which also died soon after the grandmother passed away. But for some reason, they forgot to take away the dog food that they had put out. It was only a few days after the dog died, so they probably forgot. But the stray cat managed to got into the yard and was eating the dog food that they left out. When Shinichiro saw that, he got enraged and picked up a big rock and threw it at the cat, which severely injured the cat. But for some reason, as the cat was trying to crawl away, Shinichiro see the blood and feces that the cat was spilling out because she was losing her ability to control herself. He felt a strange sensation. That's when he began to do more to the stray cat, which and then eventually leading up to killing the cat. One of the really, really bad scene there was when he actually took out a box cutter and cut the cat's eyeball open. When I read that, that was physically feeling nauseated. I had to stop and had to wait a few days before I continue reading the rest of the book. That was about halfway through the book. It was bad, but that was one of the few situations that was depicted in the book in detail that I found real disturbing. But for the sake of researching, I did read the whole book. The later portion is interesting, but not as shocking as the first couple of chapters. In this book, he also explained a little bit about his personal relationship actually with Jun Hase. A lot of people did not know that they were actually close friends. Jun was actually a close friend of Shinichiro's younger brother at the time. As previously mentioned, Jun was a special need student at the elementary school close to Shinichiro's home. At one point, even though Jun was always nice to Shinichiro felt a sudden rage and had beaten Jun once at school. Even though he beaten him so bad, Jun at the time was still considering him a friend and actually smiled and waved at him when Shinichiro was talking with the teacher. And Shinichiro was with his mother, who was trying to find a way to apologize to the teacher and the parent of Jun about what happened. Shinichiro had explained in the book that Jun was always nice to him and always considered him a friend. He did not, like many people expected, consider him annoying just because he's a special need child. He was explaining himself of his anger toward Jun was due to the fact that when he looked at the pureness of Jun, he saw a reflection of himself. The part of himself that's turning darker and darker at the time, because he is fully aware of the twisted connection inside him that's growing. He's aware of the darkness inside him, and he's trying to break away, but he often found himself unable to control it at his age. So besides attacking Jun at school, there was also an account in the memoir talking about Shinichiro actually grabbing a pair of scissors and trying to stab one of his really close friends to death. that close friends has spent many years with him, going through the same school for many years. Um, of course, that scared everybody and his close friends, although he did not disclose that information to the faculty at school. It really turned him away, and he never went back to have any contact with Shinichiro after that, understandably. Um, as I mentioned in the memoir, he did mention that he was aware of the growing darkness inside of him, and at one point he did agree with his mother to seek counseling. But unfortunately, the counseling was scheduled merely 10 days too late. Uh, it was scheduled to happen 10 days after he killed Jun Hasei. Inside that book, there was another portion that talks about after he killed Jun, he actually, for about a 24-hour period, he actually kept Jun's head in his own room above the ceiling tiles. And at one point, he had taken the head down and with him into the bathroom, and he took a shower, which he did something, quote unquote, so despicable that nobody would ever be able to imagine. And, which, of course, is, a lot of people can imagine that it's something sexual. There were also, not part of the book, but there were also, I've come across a theory that he was actually suffering from neurosis, which is a form of mild mental illness, not caused by organic disease, and have stress-related outward symptoms. But that's unconfirmed and not part of the book. He had written a letter to the publishing company who published the memoir for him. In that letter, it also contained the information about a website that he had set up as the book was released. It's a very strange website that contained a lot of composite art that he had created. But because of the public outrage, his website only lasted approximately a year, and it closed down after that. Around the same time, he also tried to start a paid article subscription service where he, I suppose, published a poem or article himself. The subscription cost about 800 yen. It was done through a blogging service called FC2. It's a very popular Japanese public blogging hosting service. But same as the website, the service provider quickly terminated the service due to a quote, a violation of service contract, likely due to the content he was publishing at the time. In the Kobe child murders case, it is easy to see how shocking it may seem to the people of Japan because of the nature and cruelty of the crime is so unusual for their country that is never seen before at the time. And for many, many years after that, a lot of child murder cases were using this specific case as a baseline for comparison. But the reason why I feel that this case is very interesting is because in the United States it is very common, well, not very common, but it's not very rare to see a juvenile murderer being tried as an adult, in the U.S. As a matter of fact, one of the report that I came across, published in 2005, called Human Rights by a group called Human Rights Watch, a total of 2,225 child offenders were currently serving life without parole in the U.S. back in 2005, probably more now. But to put things in perspective, outside of the U.S., only a total of 12 young offenders were serving life without parole across the globe, compared to 2,225 in the U.S. alone. The UN treaty called Convention on the Rights of Child was signed in November of 1989, which outlined a clear need for special care regarding underage individuals. You would think something like that the U.S. would have signed, but no. The treaty was ratified by all members of the United Nations with the exception of the United States and Somalia. U.S. is one of the handful of countries that allow the possibility for children to be sentenced to life without parole in their judicial system. At least 132 other countries in the modern world reject the use of this punishment for juveniles completely outside of the U.S. Along with this report by the Human Rights Watch, which you can find a link in the description below for the entire PDF file. The group also, in the research paper, published a couple personal letters written by some of the child that were sentenced to life without parole. Talks about how they felt and what they think should have happened if they were not trialed as an adult. It showed that a lot of them have no idea what they have done at the time, and some of them have no concept of life without parole until somebody actually went in there and explained it to them from either their lawyers or family members. They have known nothing outside of the prison walls. So my reason for bringing this report up is to show the contrast in how child offenders were handled in the U.S. and outside of the U.S. I'm not discounting the loss and suffering that are experienced by the families of the victims, but I feel that a lot of the time these underage perpetrators were automatically processed and tried as adults because of how they were portrayed in the news media and by the public and on social media, painted as evil and beyond redemption. But as in the case of the Kobe child murderers, in his memoir, he did spend a considerable amount of time describing his life after he left the reformatory when he turned 21, and how tough it was and how scared he was to enter society again how afraid he was that other people would find out what he did, and how people would have seen him differently. It also he also talked about how grateful he was when he was given a chance for a new life, even with some of the people that made initial contact with him and allowed him to live with them for a brief period of time in that halfway house. One of the couples that were there, despite knowing what he did, they still treated him equally as a normal individual and helped him out to start a new life outside the reformatory. To me, each case is different, but of course, I am not a victim's parent. I'm not a parent of a victim. I wouldn't imagine how tough it would have been. But we still cannot discount and disregard the chances for these young children who may have committed horrible crimes by standard of adults. Deny their chance to learn and correct their course in life. So, what do you guys think? What's your stand on this issue? Please leave a comment below and we can talk about it. Thank you all for watching. All the information relating to this case are in the description below. And I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening. Bye.